Okay, looks like we're going to go ahead and start. So, apologies for getting the late start, but busy times as you know. So, okay, here we go. So, welcome to the special topics. I really appreciate you taking the course, and so my motivation and objective is to make sure you certainly learn something, that interests you. Um, but also have a fairly good time with this, right? This is going to be an interesting couple of weeks as we're doing things online. I obviously was not counting on this, so we're scrambling a little bit to figure out how to do this remotely. So let's go ahead and proceed, and I'll explain a little bit what we mean by personal genomics and ancestry, right? So the course overview, the plan is there aren't going to be quizzes, there's not going to be exams. The focus is learning by doing. And so I'll go ahead and provide you some worksheets and some assigned readings to sort of get you going and whatnot and learn some skills. But basically, the idea is over the next couple of weeks, I want you to think about some projects that you might be interested in doing. Um, in a perfect world, what we could be able to get this thing done so that you can present a poster at NALICO, which is in April. And that would be a good thing because you could then put it on your resume and whatnot. But we'll talk more about sort of the end game as we move on. But for now, what I want you to think about is that there's just a few things that you're responsible for. First, this is a course, so therefore there are some expectations for you. So I want you to go ahead and read through the syllabus by next time. Take a look how course assessment's done, and basically assessment's done via worksheets, attendance, and participation, plus the project. Now the project makes up the bulk of the actual points, but I'm expecting you to show up every day, all right? So that's going to be a little hard. So how do I know that you show up? You need to check in at least twice a week on Canvas. Spend a little time on Canvas, and so that's the way we do take attendance and whatnot. Okay, so the course plan. So basically, every Tuesday I will present a mini lecture about a topic, right? And the lecture will be delivered YouTube live, and then the link to it will be provided. So for example, you go to the Canvas and you'll see everything's arranged in modules. And so I'll have week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. And this week's modules will have slides from today, and then any materials that we present on Thursday as well. Okay. In addition to the week 1, week 2, week 3 modules, you'll see general information as part of the course overview. Right? Okay, so going back to the plan, the idea is that I will basically provide you an overview, a lecture, a how-to, a skill development. Hey, look at this interesting article, okay? And then Thursdays, you'll basically be checking in with me via Zoom probably as you're doing some work. So I will have Zoom sessions where we can do interactions where you can check in with me as you're working through the different things that I assign you. Now, clearly, projects are individual based. All right, I want you to do your own project, but worksheets are things that you can do as groups, right? So we'll send out a survey here during this week to see how you want to work as groups. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so just to sort of touch bases on what we're talking about, one of the things you could think about doing is, pony up the cash and go ahead and get your genomic data from 23andMe or Ancestry.com or whatnot. obviously nobody's requiring you to do that, but that's an option. So I did this, I guess, just last year, and so I thought I'd show you sort of my results. Um, so they provide you a nice little report about their work. And one of the worksheets that we're going to do is to learn how 23andMe actually gathers its data, how it analyzes the data, and how it generates these kinds of reports. Because it's kind of a funny thing, right? So along the right-hand side is a summary of their descriptive data. So they look at thousands and thousands of single nucleotide polymorphisms or differences in DNA compared to others out there. So they have literally tens of thousands of individuals in their databases. And when you sign up for this, you tell them a little bit about yourself. And they use that then to evaluate the genetic information against their database and their assigned population in ideas. And so they have data for people from all over the world, but as you can imagine, the data is heavily biased towards white European, right? And so therefore, white person like myself, the data can be probably based on tens of thousands of comparisons, so that's pretty cool. For others, the databases may or may not have enough individuals to do a real precise thing. So that's kind of the limitation of 23andMe. It doesn't represent everybody in the world. It represents those who have submitted their DNA, and then plus whatever is publicly available through research efforts. But at any rate, so if you can look on the left-hand side, the map of the world, basically, and the regions that are colored in are basically geographic populations overlaid by modern mapping, right? So obviously our ancestors didn't recognize these national borders the way we do now. And so the best that you can say is that my DNA comes from Northwestern Europe, right? Now, we can break that down further as to say which regions in Europe it comes from, and so they do that for us, right? So they're saying Scandinavia, so that's up here, right, and including Iceland. The British and Irish, well, that's up here. As far as I can tell, that's a weird mapping of Britain. Oh, wait, that's because it isn't Britain. There's Ireland and England and Scotland there. Sorry, I was getting lost in finding my arrow, right? French and German, 14%, so that puts us right in here. And then the rest is just something called broadly Northwestern European, about 20%, so that doesn't really help us much, does it? Okay, but at any rate, they summarize where in the genome information is coming from. And it's interesting, they have no information for the Y chromosome, and that's something we'll have to talk about. The Y chromosome has very little genetic information on it. It doesn't recombine like the other chromosomes do, and so it gives you a different perspective on ancestry. And in fact, of course, it only tells you the ancestry of males, those who have the Y chromosome. Okay, so this is my genetic story, but of course, I have a personal story, right? I happen to know who my parents are, although I never met my grandparents on my dad's side. I know something about what they thought that their ancestry was. And on my mom's side, I knew both my grandma and my grandpa, and so I have some personal information about how they identified, right? So like according to my grandpa on the paternal side was German. My grandfather's father immigrated to the United States sometime in the 1870s. His mom, Irish, from her, she immigrated when she was just a little girl. Okay. So at least what my dad tells me, Okay, I should be 25% German, 25% Irish, right? Because of course you get half your genome from your dad and half of your genome from your mom. So on the other side here, uh, my grandma, she's English and French descent, and my grandfather is traces back to Norway. All right. So anyway, so roughly these are the percentages that the oral tradition tells me who I am in terms of my ancestry. So there's ways of going ahead and seeing how well this matches up. You can imagine not everybody's experience is going to be the same. Um, and so one of the things that you can think about in terms of a project is, well, this works out pretty good for Mike. Western European, can trace himself back to the 1500s. Okay, but not everybody can do that, right? And there's a variety of reasons for that. So, for example, in the United States, of course, African Americans, if they were brought over as slaves, there was a deliberate effort by the slaveholders to obliterate knowledge of a person's ancestry, right? So, being able to go back in time through oral traditions is more problematic because of cultural barriers that were imposed by others. So that's a topic also to consider. So this is special topics, and so while I'm using the phrase personal genomics as the lead, I want you to think as broadly as possible about the projects that are of interest to you. It doesn't have to be based on genetics, for example. All right, so how does it match up? And it's like, well, it matches up pretty good. And they have this category of 20% broadly European, so I'd have to go in and sort of carve out what that means. But interestingly enough, they say 40% of me is Scandinavian, and that doesn't quite match up there. So there's some interpretation, and so that's kind of the distinction between national borders and geographic populations is partly the reason there's a discrepancy between each of these categories. There's other possibilities too, of course. When you go into oral tradition, my dad says his dad was 100% German. Well, that may not be the case, right? So identity is a different issue and just as interesting and more powerful necessarily than a genetic perspective. Okay, so thinking along the lines of project ideas, I'm not asking you to decide today, right? That would be pretty silly of me. But over the next couple of weeks, we want to work together to pick a project, right? And so, suggested areas to think about. We're dividing this into personal genomics, and so within that, there's a broad range of things in which you could pursue. So, for example, you could go ahead and work with the publicly available genomes that are out there. I'm going to make mine publicly available as well so that we can do these worksheets. There's also learning about the tools that are available. So we'll broadly call that data management. So those of you that might have a little bit of interest in data analytics or bioinformatics, this might be something you want to pursue. I mean, think about this as like you don't want to do something because you already know about it. You want to try to select something that's a little bit, outside of your comfort zone, but you have some interest in it, right? There's some really powerful ethical issues related to the idea of personal genomics. And so what do we mean by personal genomics? Well, basically having sequence information about each individual person. That's what we're using personal genomics to mean, okay? And the selling point for personal genomics is often from the idea of knowing something about the genetics that you carry allows for medicine to be delivered in a better way. So that's kind of a very powerful statement, and I'll just flat out say right at the beginning, it's got a long way to go before it can actually deliver. And the technology is actually there, but the uh, associations between disease states and genetics is quite weak. And then there's, of course, how healthcare is delivered. There's virtually no support from health insurance to use precision medicine. There are a handful of exceptions, but mostly it's considered experimental, and so it's limited into the who's available or who has access to it. So anyway, these are just some of the subtopics within personal genomics that I thought would perhaps provide you with some starting points, right? And then the other part of it is the ancestry or genealogy and stuff. And so there's, again, a whole number of ways that you can approach that. Certainly, um, um, learning about how different groups of people view ancestry, genealogy is open, totally interesting subject. But there's also another way to think about it, is that sort of the technology-driven approach to thinking about ancestry and whatnot. What are the impacts on people and groups of people? That's open. What if the genetics, if you will, the technology tells you one set of stories about ancestry, but your own personal identity differs from that? So what are the kind of consequences in terms of that, ranging from how you interact with your doctor to more broadly how you're represented in society, right? So then I threw in here the idea too is that, again, I'm not telling you to do this, but if you wanted to, within about 3 weeks' time, if you ponied up the $70, I think it is now, you could get an ancestry workup done at 23andMe, and you'd have your results, probably by the end of February at the latest. And that would be something that you could work on as part of your project. Okay, so let's see where we are. Yeah, let's switch over to the website. Give me just a moment. Okay, there we go. So we're at our 480 special topics. I'm looking at the modules view. Click on home. This is our welcome page, and just sort of some basic links at this point. This was a new course, so we're busy building it, and obviously the switching over to online only has thrown a little bit of a wrench into the planning, but I plan I should be in really good shape by the end of this week, so sort of bear with me. Right now I just have links to assignments and readings. So the assignments, these are some things that I'm working on. So giving you an idea, these are target dates at this point. I'll finalize all of this as I provide the updated pages, but I'm thinking we'll probably do 5 broad categories of work, and these will take a couple of weeks of Thursday work to put together. Okay. Project page here, and so this is just giving you an idea of how we're going to put things together. So you're going to work with me, and the first item of business is to propose what you're going to do, and then we're going to have, again, as the final thing, you're going to put together a poster, and then you're going to do a presentation. So we're going to want to get the draft in pretty early so that we can work on things. My perfect world, we'd want the drafts to be available to everybody so that everybody can help improve each other's work. So that's going to be peer evaluation, right? Okay, so let's go back here and sort of end this with what I'd like you to do between now and Thursday. Okay, so click on readings, and you'll notice that I've broken down readings in these various categories, making you think in terms of your project, right? And so what I'd like you to do is kind of scan through these, thinking about what kind of thing am I interested in doing a project on, and then pick one of these articles to start with. Okay? Let's see. The assigned reading will be this one, What is Ancestry? And so not today, but next Tuesday, I will provide a lecture based on this article. Okay? So take a look, all the, how do I want to say this, all of the assignments and things for you to do, I'm going to be presenting to you through announcements. So basically, again, thinking about your attendance, I'm asking you to check in Canvas at least twice a week. So minimally what you do is on the start of Tuesday or the Monday evening before, right, you come in and check announcements. And so I will have announcements about things I'm asking you to do, right? As you know, Canvas has a to-do list, which is not showing up here because I haven't really, okay, there it is, right? So these are based on, so this is okay, but rely on the announcements, okay? So anyway, that is, I think, the end of my presentation for today. So take a look for some announcements later today about things I'm going to ask you to do by Thursday. And I will talk to you later. Thanks for listening.